Well, welcome to the Herb of the Week with me, your host and instructor of the Botanical Medicine Study Course, Stephanie Georgieff. I want to thank all of you who are subscribing and liking my videos. Welcome to everyone. I'm so privileged to share this amazing journey into the healing world of nature with you. Here we are in the last week of April, and where I'm living these days, nature is blooming like crazy. And in a few weeks, we will have fields of beautiful red poppies. In my beloved home state of California, which is almost slid off into the ocean because of so much rain and snow this year, nature has awoken to a super bloom. Purple, yellow, and orange. I always love the spring after the stormy weather in California. And California, the Golden State, the soils, no matter how long they are parched with drought, once a bit of water hits, boom. And I urge you all to look either in person in the open fields throughout California or online. Many of the state and national news outlets are covering this beautiful and rare super bloom event. So much horribleness is going on in the world. In the regular news, it's quite depressing. Many of us are struggling with difficulties on all levels, specifically because of wild weather. But it doesn't seem that nature got the memo, and those lupines and poppies in California are not watching the news. Nature did not get the memo on our current political mess. So she's putting on her beautiful spring outfit and encouraging bees to make lots of honey. For this week, we are continuing our liver health herb series with an herb that most of us are familiar with in traditional Chinese herbalism. And we find this, those of us in the know, find it incredibly useful for liver health. For this week's herb of the week, we'll be exploring Bupleurum chinense. And Bupleurum, that's the Latin word. The Latin name is a large genus of annual or perennial herbs or woody shrubs with about 190 species. And this belongs to the plant family Apiaceae. And FYI, there's a Native American species called appropriately Bupleurum Americanum. So if you ever see a Latin binomial for the plant, and that's the Bupleurum chinense there, if there's a chinense or a sino or a sinensis in the name, it means that it's native to China. And I'll go over some of the qualities of the American variety later in this video. The Apiaceae or carrot family is mostly of aromatic flowering plants. It has 37,000 species and 434 genera. And the Apiaceae is composed mostly of, and I think this is interesting, it's annual, biannual, or perennial herbs. And I'm thinking, well, what other type of herbs are there? But that's what it's made up of. And it's known primarily by its characteristic flowers that are in clusters, which sometimes resemble an umbrella. And the correct term for this feature, these flowers, is called umbels, which look a bit like an umbrella, which is the old name of this family called Umbelliferae. Again, apologies for my Latin translation. I'm trying to live and speak in about 4 different languages right now, and I'm finding I can't pronounce any of them these days. But Bupleurum chinense is more commonly known in the herbal and supplement world as chai hu. And so I will refer to it that way because that's how I got to know this wonderful herb. Now, Bupleurum chinense or chai hu is native to East Asia. And as you can see in this botanical drawing, the leaves of the plant are long and thin, and they kind of resemble fennel. It's a perennial herb which lives in the grasslands of China, India, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. Now, the root is elongated, brown, woody, and branched. And this is the medicinal part of the herb. We don't, at least in Chinese herbalism, we don't use this other parts of this plant. So you can chop those beautiful flowers and put them in a vase on your desk. The stems are zigzagging and they grow up to 1 meter or 3 feet tall. The basal leaves are oblanceolate. So if you want to know what an oblanceolate leaf is, you can see that here. And this means the broadest half of the leaf is in the middle and it tapers towards the apex. And the middle leaves are elliptic, and the umbels, which are the little flowers, are about 5 centimeters across. And there's anywhere from 5 to 10 per bunch. And the 5 petals are bright yellow. Now, the herbal actions of Bupleurum chinense or Chinese chai hu. And if you get a Materia Medica, how the Chinese do their herbs is they put them into categories. And the categories sound really kind of arcane and bizarre. But if you understand the diagnosis, you'll see how useful these categories are. And they also don't always translate into our Western understanding of the herb. We have no concept of cool, bitter herbs that release the exterior. And cool doesn't mean they're, the bomb. It means they are the temperature quality of the herb, and how it works in the body is cool. So it's cooling and it's bitter. And both of those qualities have very specific actions on the body. And so in Chinese medicine, it enters the gallbladder, liver, pericardium, and triple burner meridians. As I said before, the taste and temperature are bitter and cool. It resolves lesser yang disorders. Now, when you hear that term in the West, we're thinking maybe this applies to a couple of former wrestlers that are under house arrest for human trafficking in Romania, but that's not what this is. So if you understand yin and yang and Chinese diagnosis, this is your herb for lesser yang disorders. It also helps to spread liver qi and resolve stagnation, and it releases the exterior. Now, the applications and benefits of Bupleurum chinense or chai hu, and again, remember that the Chinese are hugely specific in their diagnosis, meaning it's difficult to say a single herb treats X. And so you need to be careful with this. And it's very specific. Chinese diagnosis is very specific about what is causing a problem. And rarely in Chinese medicine are single herbs used to treat something. Formulas usually have several herbs as a foundation. And let me tell you, we had to memorize lists of herbs and all the different modifications to pass our exams at school and licensing boards. So when you go to acupuncture school, you're taught how to diagnose based on all sorts of symptoms, and then you look at patterns. In Western modern medicine, and I would say that a lot of the modern application of herbs, they're not as specific in the diagnosis. So there's a diagnosis of epilepsy, and we understand that in the West as the firing of neurons in the brain. And this is considered the cause. In Chinese medicine, there are all sorts of different organ dysfunction patterns which can cause epilepsy. And because there are different organ dysfunction patterns, there are different treatments for each cause. So this is my argument with much of the information floating about on various organization and medical center websites. It's very well-intentioned and they are useful, but they're very limited because they're looking at things from a Western perspective, which we all look at things from our own perspective. So I feel that this way of looking at herbs, particularly Chinese herbs, can be very misleading. So you need to consider the qualities and origins of certain problems. And if the symptom picture fits, this herb can be really helpful. If not, it can make things worse. So as always, if you're dealing with a very serious health problem or even a not so serious health problem, you need to consult an acupuncturist or Chinese herbalist to get an accurate diagnosis. Or better yet, go to acupuncture school and delve into this fascinating and useful paradigm. With that background and caveat, it's been found through scientific research as well as traditional use that chai hu can help liver diseases such as hepatitis or cirrhosis. It can treat viruses and bacteria and common respiratory infections. And common respiratory infections are often considered exterior conditions. So that's why this herb releases those. And Western medicine goes, hey, it treats viruses and bacteria. It has anti-inflammatory properties. And again, a lot of pain in Chinese medicine diagnosis is considered exterior. So this herb helps with that. It can help with certain types of depression, specifically if it's involved with liver in terms of Chinese diagnosis. It's used in epilepsy treatment, again, if it's liver in origin. It's also been used in cancer treatment, which is why you can find information about this herb on various cancer websites and treatment centers. And it also helps in certain types of PMS. And again, there's all sorts of ways to have PMS in Chinese medicine. So you need to diagnose that properly. So there are all kinds of wonderful Scrabble words or things that you want to name, a racehorse or various animals. I think this would be appropriate for certain reptiles or large fish in lovely koi ponds. The saiko is the Japanese term for chai hu. So they put that word in front of all the different chemicals. And in this diagram, they're all the saponins, which have huge influence on human health. And we're finding all sorts of essential fatty acids, such as linoleic and stearic and palmic. There's rutin and quercetin. It's just a wonderful, wonderful herb. Now, traditionally, chai hu as a Chinese herb is rarely taken by itself. In fact, as I've said numerous times, there are very few Chinese herbs that are taken individually, but you can purchase individual Chinese herbs in tinctures. You can also get the dried bulk herb or the powdered herb form. Some companies make a freeze-dried powder from the teas. So they'll make a very strong tea and they'll dehydrate it and powder it. So it's a lot like instant coffee or those iced tea mixes. In fact, this, I think, is one of the best ways to take Chinese formulas, because if you go to a traditional Chinese therapist or herbalist, you will get your prescription and then you get these packets of dried herbs, and then you're supposed to boil the heck out of them on several boils and on, and it makes your house smell funky, or you forget and you burn them, and it's just kind of a quite involved process. But if you order the powdered form, like the instant tea stuff, it's much easier. You just put a little bit of, a scoop or 2 scoops in your warm water and drink that down. So this herb is beneficial for the liver, and it's often used in integrative and natural cancer therapies. But you need to be aware there are certain chemotherapies that are contraindicated. Chai hu is contraindicated with these chemotherapies. And I can tell from my experience, most oncologists don't want their patients taking things like vitamins and herbs when using chemotherapy, because the chemotherapy is targeted to kill stuff, and the herbs are targeting to make things live. So if you're challenged by cancer, please consult your physician and a qualified herbalist on whether or not you can use this herb while undergoing chemotherapy. It's also suggested to stop taking chai hu 2 weeks before any sort of surgery, as it increases clotting time, meaning that you bleed longer than necessary. And if you're under the care of an acupuncturist and you're taking any type of tea or pill and about to get dental work or undergo any type of surgery, make sure you find out what's in your formula and stop it if chai hu is in there so you don't bleed out on the table. I guarantee you they'll blame the herb and your poor Chinese practitioner. Also, if you're on immunosuppressive drugs and you people know who you are, chai hu may counter such drugs. So, as with everything, you need to keep everybody informed and become informed yourself between your physician, your acupuncturist, and your herbalist. We don't want to make things worse. Just because something's natural does not mean the chemicals inside are benign, and they can actually cancel any sort of drug therapy or make things worse. And that's not the whole point, is it? Now, one of the most commonly prescribed Chinese formula using chai hu is called Xiao Yao San. And if you see the word san in the title, this means powder or pill. And if you see tong, it means tea. Now, these are all the herbs in the formula. And if you go to an herbalist, you'll get a little packet full of stuff like this. Now, when I was in acupuncture school, we learned to identify the dried bulk herb. And, this was my big challenge in acupuncture school, was to deal with these piles of dried herbs. But when I started to see the plants when they are alive, it helped me have a relationship with them and also to understand why they did what they did. Now, this formula is really the modern life formula because we're all so angry, sedentary, eating bad foods, and live in toxic environments. So our livers need help. Pretty much everybody is on this formula at some point in their lives. And I call this formula happy tea, but the traditional name for the formula in English is called rambling powder. I don't know why, but that's what it's called. Now, at my college, the American College of Traditional Chinese Medicine in San Francisco, had a small medicinal herb garden at the school. And to be honest, this is why I decided to go there compared with the other fine schools in the Bay Area of California. Now, ACTCM, as it's known in academia, also helped to create a Chinese medicinal herb garden at the Berkeley Botanical Garden at the University of California, Berkeley, across the bay. So if you're in the Bay Area, you really should visit this garden. And I've given you a link in the program notes. The entire botanical garden is amazing, but for obvious reasons, the Chinese herb garden has a special place in my heart. The Chinese have left quite a lovely cultural stamp in the Bay Area as well as California. They're part of our multicultural heritage from the days of the gold rush. So if you want to grow your own chai hu or start a Chinese medicinal garden at home, this is probably the only and most, I would say, the most wonderful book. It's called, and here you go, what a title. It's called The Chinese Medicinal Herb Farm, and it's by Peg Schaefer. And I've put a link in the program notes on some gardening information for chai hu. Now, as promised, I wanted to cover the Bupleurum Americanum. And the common name for this, I've never heard of this. Okay, I've never heard of this. The American Thorowax, whatever. It's the only native US species of this small genus. I'm sure there's a native name for this plant, but I could not find it. It has a very limited distribution. This is a very elite plant, and it's generally restricted to the northern Rocky Mountains, but it's also found in the San Juan Mountains of southwestern Colorado and Lincoln County, New Mexico. Some of it is also in Oregon. It grows up to 20 inches high, and the main difference is the flowers are quite yellow in this species. The American Bupleurum likes rocky places. It grows between 4,000 and 12,000 feet. So you need to be up that high if you want to grow it in your own garden. And it grows from June through September. And I could not find if it was used by the local natives. I suspect it was, since it has such a small area of growth, it may not have been very popular or widely used outside of its natural habitat. So this is Stephanie Georgia saying thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with me. I hope this has inspired searches and inspiration for this really, truly beautiful plant. To me, it just looks like a fairies dance around this plant. Now, if you would like to receive a free introductory lesson on the Botanical Medicine Study course, the link to receive the video and handouts is in the program notes. I'm gearing up for the complete online course to begin soon, so stay tuned. And until next time, be well.